Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist with Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, early this morning, it was the southeast through the Carolinas that's about the only place in the country, maybe save California as well, that has been spared the brutally cold Arctic air. And this is when I started preparing some of my weather briefings this morning. Where I live right here in Champaign, we hit 1. But you can see the contrast. Some parts of the upper Midwest down here are in that almost to minus 30. And then down in southern Florida at 2:30 this morning, it was 77 degrees in Miami. Well, we are going to be watching the development of a large low-pressure system that's going to be right here on the Texas-Louisiana border, where, as you can see, freezing temperatures have made it all the way to the Gulf. That's right, Houston with 24 this morning. And the low is going to run right here along this temperature gradient and head up toward the north and east. And we're going to talk about the rain we're going to get out of the first system this week for the Carolinas, and then a second system later on in the week. But on the backside of this, there's going to be a lot of ice and snow. Now, speaking of ice, I just want to show you something kind of cool here. This is actually where I live over in Illinois, and I'm looking toward a town called Champaign. And these things that you see in the sky here are called ice pillars. And here's another view just looking to the west. We see them all the time whenever it gets really, really cold like this. And the reason why is because the very thin cirrus that almost are always above us at any given time, they put down a lot of ice crystals. And when it's this cold, they tend to survive the trip down to the surface. And if it's humid enough for them to survive, what you get are these plates that as they fall, light from some sort of light source, like a spotlight for a sign or a street lamp, can often bounce off the bottom, like acting as a reflector off the bottom of these, and point right toward your eye. Therefore, when you look and you see the ice crystals falling down flat ways like this, you see this pillar of light in the sky. It's a really cool thing, but oftentimes it's a signal of how cold it is. Now, talking about ice, we have had ice from coast to coast. Over there on the right, you're watching a video. This was near Greensboro, sent in by Tim Buckley here. I think it was originally taken by Nicole Braxton, but you can see some of the damage we had here from some of the ice accumulation here in North Carolina. And then on the other side of the country, Jeff, over in Oregon City, this is in Portland, 1.5 inches of ice here. Well, the good news is that moving forward in the state of North Carolina, we have less risk of the severe winter weather than they do in other parts of the country. And so let's get right into it and talk about it. Much of this is coming on the brutally cold air that is seen here in this animation, where each of these blue dots shows us where we were approaching or set new record low temperatures. And you can see here, this is now getting into Valentine's Day here. And then early in the morning here on the 15th, look at all of the cold air in the midsection of the country. When we look back over this winter, though, take a look at the map that's over here on the right, or the graph, excuse me. This goes back to August 19th. And that dashed line you see here represents the average temperature for the whole of the lower 48 and the southern Canadian prairie, okay? And if you just notice, this is fall, getting into winter. We've had very few truly, long duration shots at colder air. This is the only one. It's right here, and it is, well, it's peaking right now. And it's going to be cold for a while. We're going to talk about how those temperatures translate to the east with time, because to your west, it is cold. This is El Paso, Texas. This is southwestern Texas. The National Weather Service put out a video this morning of some of the snow on the cactus here. So this was last night, and many of us in meteorology were amazed to see this, because on Sunday evening, we had two things. You could have driven from New Mexico all the way to Vermont. That's over 2,000 miles, and stayed within a winter storm warning. Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Ohio. Those are the states that were completely enclosed, the entire state, with winter storm warning. But look at the other ones: Louisiana, Mississippi, Illinois, my home state, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee. These areas were all in winter storm warning as well. Now, early this morning, we've backed off because the system is now forming here over the Texas-Louisiana border. But there is a substantial ice threat in through this corridor here as this storm system rolls through the Ohio River Valley over the next 36 hours. The thing is, though, its trajectory is going to keep us in the Carolinas over on the side of things where we get mostly rain out of this. And this is just the first of two systems we're going to be talking about. On infrared satellite, just to show you how cold it is, as the sun set and we got into the overnight hours here in the northern plains, I'm just going to pause it right here. You can see that we could see all the way to the ground. And the ground temperatures were just as cold as the high cloud tops here with the system we're watching dive down here into Texas yesterday. Something neat just to show you, though, is you see that blotch right there? That is actually a warm spot. and that would be Minneapolis-St. Paul. That is the urban heat island effect of Minneapolis-St. Paul. Well, as I get this playing again, you can see this deep wave, watch it here, diving down toward the Texas-Louisiana border, and it is going to be the culprit for a powerful system that comes toward us, well, two powerful systems that come toward us this week. And here they are. Now, I wanted to share with you a little bit of the dynamics of one of these systems, because here's the main trough, and right here is a downstream ridge. I'll put a dash line through the ridge and a solid line through the trough. Now what happens is the atmosphere comes through like this and then has to make a hard turn like that as you get what's called upper level divergence right in this area. In fact, we call it ageostrophic flow. What it means is that due to a jet streak here and a jet streak there and the curve in the flow, that where I'm putting the X, air is exhausting upwards. It's leaving in the upper levels of the atmosphere, going up, and therefore it's replaced below with inflow, and that creates a low pressure system. And you can see it right here at about a mile above our heads, a deep low over the lower Mississippi River Valley, and the flow around it is drawing a lot of very warm, moist air, as you see in the black arrows I just drew. But the problem is beneath that, okay? The surface low is forming here, and there's all sorts of cold air coming in behind this, while we'll be in the warm sector of this for a while yet. But all that cold air that's kind of undercutting the warm air aloft is producing this region right in through here where we're expecting a lot of ice, and it will get into the Appalachian Mountains. You can see here that early this morning on the European model where the ice was going to be located. The snow on the backside of it coming out of Texas into Louisiana and Arkansas, and I'm going to show you the rain that we're going to be dealing with later today. So as we go through the day here on Monday, this is midday, getting into the overnight hours here. And that low then moves up here toward Ohio, West Virginia, heavy snows on the backside. And this will be the time overnight tonight that we get our chance to see some heavy rain out of this. So you can see that through 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, that first round of precipitation is going to be moving through and trying to get out of there by midday. Okay, system number one, as I kind of quickly played it forward there, gets out. It's now moving off to the north and east. So we get a drier middle of the week throughout the day on Tuesday, into Wednesday, and now into Wednesday evening. See it there? But our next low is taking shape almost in the same area that the one did before it. And as it starts to move, my concern will be early in the morning on Thursday. Do you see how the European model is putting the dark pinks in here? This is the color I use to denote where there's ice, so I can see it very clearly. And the ice threat here along the Appalachian Mountains due to some cold air damming is relatively high. But another round of potentially very heavy rain as we get through Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And then as we go into Thursday afternoon and evening, you continue to see that ice threat here up in Virginia, but heavier rains to the south. And that system moves out by, well, here's Friday, 12 a.m. This is now 6 a.m. on Friday morning, and now it seems to be out of the way. Now watch what happens as I go into the weekend. Higher pressure moves in, some light snow in the Appalachian Mountains, but higher pressure, which was once over the Midwest, is now sitting by Sunday right over North Carolina, which means going into that day 5 through day 10 time period, we're going to get the bulk of that colder air, as on the back side of it, warmth starts to rebound into the midsection of the country. And I'm going to give you those long-range temperatures in just a few moments. But let's stitch a few things together here first. Ice. Now, this is through the entirety of the next week. We do see here in the models that up against the Appalachian Mountains with that cold air damming event that comes down like this and butts up against the mountains, we could get some ice in parts of North Carolina, but really into Virginia. When we look here at the probability of getting at least 1/10 of an inch of ice, this is from the National Weather Service, you do see the highest probabilities right in through here, okay? And that's better than a 50 to 60% chance. So we got to be very careful with that. But you can see the main axis of heaviest ice will be back to our west and to our almost to our south and west too. Snow, this is what we're expecting through the next week in terms of total accumulated snowfall. So this is not going to be a week where we're talking about snow in North Carolina, except for possibly on the back side of that system getting a little bit of snow in the Appalachian Mountains. I can kind of zoom in here and show you what the National Digital Forecast Database is calling for, so you can see that most of this will be missing us here through the next 48 hours or so. Total rainfall. Now, you notice who's getting the rain and who is not getting the rain. It's dry in this wedge and it's dry in the southwest, but with that flow diving down like this and then racing on off in that direction, we can see that here in the southeast of the mid-Atlantic, widespread 1.5 to upwards of 3 inches of rainfall. We can kind of zoom in here and get a better view. And I'm building you some new maps because I now have a subscription to the European data here. And we do see we're expecting some heavy rainfall here across the eastern part of the state, but widespread over the next week, chances of getting 1.5 to 2+ inches of rainfall. Now let's back this out again and just see how that compares to normal. What you notice is that's about 1.5 inches more than what we typically expect for this time of year over the next week. From there, where does the pattern go? Well, we're going to notice that the polar vortex both in the stratosphere and in the troposphere go back to the Canadian archipelago. So the flow of the jet stream looks something like that as we get out to day 10. Unfortunately, this trough means that we're going to hang on to the cooler weather over here in the mid-Atlantic to the Carolinas through at least day 10. But look at what happens by the time I take you out to day 15. We are seeing a deeper trough extend across the western part of North America with a large ridge upstream and some ridging here over the southeast. Now, what this does is this tends to kick off a lot more active systems that roll through like this. So while I expect this to keep us still with above average precipitation, we are going to be seeing more mild conditions here across North Carolina, Virginia. All right. The coldest air is going to sink back to the west. What else is going on here? Well, I listed out the major features. We're breaking away from this Arctic air mass because where we had once had very, very high pressure over the Arctic, we now have lower pressure that's forming. We're losing that big ridge over the North Atlantic. And the Pacific Ocean, as seen in both the EPO and the PNA, is going to be breaking down into a trough. But that stratospheric polar vortex retreating here, that's the map on the right, is critical to keeping the cold air from hanging around too long. Now, what else is helping this? The MJO, it's in phase 7, but it seems to be collapsing over here into the null space. But our La Nina has given a little bit of a kick here and got some stronger trade winds over the next 15 days or so. Now, what does all that mean? Well, if we start to see stronger trade winds showing up in this area, okay, this is supportive of more subtropical ridging again. This is supportive of sending the MJO back over here at about phase 5. And as a result of that, it's another signal toward a more mild pattern across much of the southern half and eastern half of the United States. So what I mean by all of that is really shown to you here. Here's our maximum temperatures today. And yes, we're cool today, but very cold in the midsection of the United States. As we go now into the day on Tuesday, see how you get stuck in that warm sector? Major temperature gradient, 34 to 67 across the state on Tuesday, the 16th. As we go into Wednesday, now we start to cool off. Thursday, remember, our next system is emerging, so we get back into the warm sector along the coast, but heavier rains are expected during that time period. And as we go from there into Friday, the cold air sets up for us over the weekend. You see now our highs are going to be struggling to get out of the low 40s. And that's going to last through the day on Sunday. But as we saw, the day 5 through 10 time period is likely going to feature some cooler air here, but the pattern is changing. And look at this, day 10 through 15, both the GFS and even more so in the European, trying to get us some warmer air back into place here, warmer compared to normal. And this is through the beginning of March, which means warmer than normal. We're well into the 50s here and 60s along the coast at this time of year. So watch this. We're going to see if it sticks around. The longer-term forecast, now looking at the first week of March, suggests that it does. And as we get out there even farther, first taking a look at precipitation, but that subtropical ridge, well, it might keep us with an active weather pattern, but as we get out there looking farther into this time period, that subtropical ridge, while it keeps an active Ohio River Valley storm track, the milder conditions seem to be at play here as we look out through the month of March. But what I want to show you here is that looking at precipitation, we keep on the wetter side of things. It's drier in the southern plains. It's drier through the northern plains. It's drier toward Florida and along the Gulf Coast. But the active Ohio River Valley storm track keeps dragging fronts through us, possibly keeping us above average on precipitation through March. Now look at this. Going all the way up to the middle of March, I see a ridge forming here. I'll put an X in it, and a trough here, and some signaling here of another ridge setting up off the southeast. Now, given that configuration, I thought it was interesting that the analogs for the wettest Marches in California saw that same thing. And what I want to tell you is, if we end up dipping a trough, let me write that in white, right here off the coast, this tends to give us a lot of strong southwest flow. This is supportive of wetter than average conditions for North Carolina, but oftentimes we see a ridge forming here too, and therefore milder conditions. So we're just building this picture for March, and we're backing it up with those long-range forecasts I provided you a week ago, that last forecast. From here, remember, if we start to get a strong subtropical jet stream coming from Hawaii to California, that again tends to give us more southeast ridging. And that is another case in point for the possible above average temperatures to be expected throughout the month of March. Very quickly, South America. Over the next week, very wet in Brazil's northern growing areas, but dry in the south and dry into Argentina. If I compare this to normal, you can really see that this area and through here, where they're trying to harvest one crop and put another one in, and mind you, they're about 25% behind average on the harvesting pace, they're going to continue to be wet. But although it looks dry to the south down here, it is not forecast to be hot, so this is not much stress on the crop in this particular region. Looking out there, though, the next chance for rain I see for Argentina, which would be good for their crop, looks like it's going to be coming early next week, and the likelihood of this happening is relatively low because the week 2 precipitation patterns still keep this area over drier. Now, as I look out here longer term, my concern for Argentina stays relatively high. And I've got some reasons over there on the left, but the European model still wants to keep Brazil's eastern and northern growing areas wet, but I'll put a D over it, a risk for drier conditions in Argentina. And therefore, we need to watch that carefully as the Argentinian crop has been met with stretches of drier weather early and some rains as of late. But the question is, what is that going to do to the overall quality of the crop coming out of Argentina? And we're going to be getting those numbers from Brazil very, very soon, and I'll share them with you. I appreciate your attention today. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you.